Looking to buy a car this season and not sure where to start? Try FlexCar instead. FlexCar is Atlanta's only month-to-month car lease that includes your vehicle, mileage, insurance, maintenance, roadside assistance, and more. Cars start at $199 per month, and there are 0 down payments. Plus, you can cancel anytime with no penalties or swap cars whenever your needs change. Get approved in minutes and pick up your car, or have your car delivered straight to you. Get started today at flexcar.com and receive 100 free miles on your first order with the code ATL100.
Apathy is what can create the most problems for those that are still held captive. We can't live with apathy. We must have urgency. And you guys say it so very well.
Hope is mandatory. It's not a suggestion and it's not advice.
We are breaking into programming right now with this special report here on Dr. Phil's Merit TV.
Dr. Phil is joining us at the desk right now with a Merit TV exclusive. And Dr. Phil, thank you for joining us. This is going to be a riveting conversation.
Well, sadly it is. This is a family that I've met and come to know and have followed very, very closely, and a wonderful family. I can't tell you how close-knit they are and how devoted these parents are. Let's just jump right into it. Joining me now are Rachel and Jon Goldberg-Polin, parents of Hersh Goldberg-Polin. Rachel, Jon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I'm so glad to talk to you, but I am so very sorry for the occasion, so very sorry for the reason. We all know that your son, Hersh, was abducted from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. You saw horrific videos of him being abducted, injured during that abduction with regard to his arm. You later saw a video of him that did not seem at all like him because of the way he was speaking and the way he looked. And then a later video close to the time of what was hoped to be a release, and then finding out that in fact you had lost him. And I have sent my condolences from Robin and myself before now, but let me say to you eye to eye how very, very sorry I am that this has come to the outcome that it has. It's just tragic. I'm sorry. Jon, I don't know what to say to you, father to father. Rachel, I just, you won't hear me say I know how either of you feel because I can't know. Robin sends her love, and first off, how are you getting by day to day? What's it been like day to day since you've learned of the loss?
So as one can perhaps imagine, we are suffering. We are still in mourning 6 weeks after burying our son. I don't want to compare our grief and suffering to any other family who's going through grief and suffering of any kind. I will say, though, that just to remind your audience, and you touched on it, we had 330 days during which we knew that Hersh was taken, was critically injured, was being held captive, likely in dungeons in Gaza. And we marched around the world, meeting leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, doing everything to advocate. And we maintained our hope. Somehow, through all of it, we were optimistic that we were going to get back Hersh and the other hostages. We didn't know when, we didn't know how, but we really believed. And so to have that optimism for 330 days and then to just have it crushed by the news that he and 5 other beautiful young people were lined up and executed is a crushing blow. And we are still reeling from it, but we've made one important decision, and that is we're gonna mourn, we're gonna suffer, but we are young, we've got 2 daughters, and for ourselves, for our daughters, and because Hersh would want it this way, we are going to move on and somehow reclaim and live life.
Well, that is such a courageous attitude to take. I can tell you from a psychological perspective, you will never get over this. you will get through it. You will find a way, inspired by Hersh. I know that you will, because I know a lot about him from what you guys have taught me and what I've learned about him. Rachel, what do you say to yourself in the middle of the night when you wake up and look at the ceiling alone, knowing that there's not another day to have hope? There's not another day to pray that it's going to come to a good end. When you wake up and know it's over, it's come to an end. What do you say to yourself in the middle of the night when you wake up to that reality?
Well, first, one of the things that is very important is for 330 days, we were in utter, constant trauma and terror, completely. And so much of that was because we knew that Hersh was in complete trauma and terror and in horrible conditions. And so there is some sort of, I don't want to call it relief, because obviously it's not relief, but knowing that he is not in the hands of people who are torturing him in truly the bowels of, I can only describe it as hell, where Hersh was, and those other 5 beautiful young people. And so, I say to myself, he is no longer suffering. Now I have to figure out, how do I miss him in a way for the rest of my life that still enables me to live and to choose life? There are lots of people who throughout the world who have suffered horrendous tragedies. We are now some of those people. And as Jon sort of hit upon, this will always be with us, obviously. But there is a choice of trying to navigate forward. And so I try to focus on what I truly feel, which is I actually feel that I was blessed by God for 23 years to have Hersh as my son. And I try to focus on that, on the gift of having had him when I wake up in the middle of the night. And I sometimes talk to him in the middle of the night and I say, I know you're here. I don't know how. I don't know how to feel you this way, but you need to give your mama some love and you need to be with me. I've said before, there are people who walked out of Auschwitz and they went forward and they had good lives. They never forgot their loved ones that they lost in Auschwitz, their spouses, their children, their siblings, their parents, but they went forward. And there are people who walked out of Auschwitz and they never left Auschwitz. And I don't want to be one of those people. I don't know where resilience comes from, but I pray for it every day. I just actually started therapy last week, which with an incredible world-known trauma therapist. I'm going back tomorrow for my second session, which, as you know, it's almost like matchmaking you need to have the right chemistry, the right therapist. And I'm really praying that this is a good match, because I know that all of us need help to get through this. And there's no playbook for this. This is such an unusual circumstance that we are in. And also, I'd like to share with you, I don't know if you know the details, when you hear that someone was executed, I think of it as, it's almost like clean. It's like people are lined up and shot. And that's absolutely not what the scene was in this airless, completely pitch black tunnel that was 60 feet underground. There was no plumbing, no electricity. There were big bottles of urine throughout the tunnel that all of the captives, these 6 beautiful young people, had to urinate into bottles. All the urine was very dark because they were so dehydrated. They had put a bucket a little bit down this, small corridor of the tunnel to use when they had to go to the bathroom, and it wasn't for urine. And Hersh was almost 6 feet tall. He was just a hair short of Jon. He was almost 6 feet tall. When we buried him, Hersh was 116 pounds. one of the girls, young women who he found with, the tunnel was only 5'5". So he was standing when he was shot. This is what a forensics expert was explaining to us. He, as you know, was missing his left hand. A bullet went through his right hand, into his shoulder, into his neck, out the side of his head. He then collapsed to his knees and was shot with the gun on his head, in the back of his head, and it came out of the top of his head. He was on his knees for 2 days, frozen, with young Eden Yerushalmi, who's 24 years old, beautiful young Eden. Her head was on his side or on his lap. I mean, all of them were emaciated. Eden was 5'5" and she was 79 pounds. They were all completely emaciated. They were all bullet ridden. It was a complete nightmare scene. And so what also is something that's really motivating us to share this with people is we still have 101 hostages there from all different places all over the world, from 5 different religions, and we need to get these people home so that more people don't come home in body bags like Hersh.
And you believe that, based on the description that you're giving, and now that his body has been recovered, that he clearly had been subjected to torture all of this time, all of these 11 months, because you've been able to see the wounds all over his body and the other hostages as well. So you can only assume that this kind of torture is continuing for those that are still there. And that's why you have a sense of urgency to get these other hostages out of there now.
That's correct. Just the conditions in which they were held alone were torturous. Again, Rachel mentioned 65 feet below ground, this tunnel, 5.5 feet tall. It was just over 2 feet wide. So when the bodies were found, they also found 6 mattresses along with the 6 dead bodies. The assumption is that the mattresses would get lined up at night, head to toe, because they barely even fit one in the width of the tunnel. And again, the other telltale sign is the weights. Rachel mentioned Hersh's weight, and one of the women, one of the men we know from his family, he went in at 190 pounds. He was pulled out, his dead body, at 130 pounds. They were starving in there. So the conditions themselves were torturous. And then there's the marks that were on some of their bodies, including Hersh's. You talked about the video that came out on day 201, 129 days before we got the news that he'd been executed. In that video, we saw marks on his face. We saw signs that, as a parent, were very concerning to us. They're being tortured in there. And it's incredible that for 374 days, the world has not been able to band together and demand the release of the ones who could still be saved, including, I'll say, 13 women.
And a 1.5-year-old baby and an 86-year-old grandfather.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrific what's going on. And let me, focusing on Hersh for a moment, knowing him the way that you do, how do you think he went about coping with surviving what he went through for these 300 plus days? What do you think his strategy was? How do you think he was able to get through this?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that those beautiful 6, and I call them the beautiful 6, not because they were actually physically beautiful, although they were, but they each had very beautiful, vivid qualities that we've gotten to know the families. And so we've gotten to hear about these individuals. We now know that those 6 were together since the very end of November, which means that those 6 created a family. It was 4 young men and 2 young women, and they were together from the end of November until August 29th, which is the date that they were executed. They were not found until Saturday, August 31st. But I have a feeling Hersh was the youngest of those beautiful six. They all were really vivacious, dynamic. Each one had senses of humor that were different. They were very bright. They were very curious people. One of them was a yoga teacher. She was studying PT. So we're hoping that we know from the release of the first hostages in November, they said she used to do guided meditation for them. So I'm hoping that that was Carmel, and we're hoping that she was still doing that and doing yoga with them and helping. You know, certainly Hersh was critically wounded with one arm, and he was the baby of the group. And I have a feeling that people were really trying to help him. He's always had a good sense of humor, very little ego, very smart, a photographic memory. And I have a feeling they were all getting each other through in different ways. And I think they did absolutely every single thing right to survive in those conditions for 328 days. They were all absolute heroes. And it gives us a tremendous sense of comfort knowing that they were together, they kept each other alive, and they died together.
So you do find comfort in knowing that he was not isolated and alone, that he had the other five, and you feel like there was a bond among those six.
Definitely.
You know, we did not know while he was in captivity that he was held with that group of people. So part of the torture for us, beyond everything else, was wondering, is he alone? Is he with other people? What other people? So that was part of the trauma. But as Rachel said, since learning that he was with five other people, that he was likely with them in some formation since late November, meaning either all six together or in two smaller groups at different points in time, but in some formation, those six were together for a long time. We talk about it as families that, like, within the darkest of the tortures that they went through, we could picture that somehow they made each other smile. They maybe even danced a little bit. Five of the six were taken from the music festival of unity and love. And we believe that they made the best of it for each other, and each one for them, him and herself.
Mm-hmm. And Jon, I wonder if you feel what Rachel said. She said that she has some conflict in feeling a degree of relief, knowing that he has escaped this hellish torture. Do you feel conflict in taking some comfort in knowing that they're no longer torturing your son?
So I share that comfort of saying, at least he's no longer being tortured. And you know what? We got Hersh and the other five and brought them home, so to speak. And we gave them proper, respectful burials. And we feel good about that because there are dead bodies that are being held in captivity. We have friends who we've met along this journey who know that their loved ones were murdered in captivity, and those bodies are still being held. So there is comfort in knowing that he's not suffering, Hersh. He's home. He's properly buried. That is all comforting. Obviously, there's so many conflicted feelings, one of which is a sense of failure. And we really try to tell ourselves we didn't fail. We talked to everybody. We went all over the world, meeting world leaders, religious leaders, pushing every possible door. But at the end of the day, the results are binary. We always said either we succeed, which is to say we bring home Hersh and other hostages alive, or we fail. And the result is what it is. So I have a lot of disappointment in the way the world failed to respond to the situation, failed to understand every second is urgent, and it still is for the remaining 101.
Well, it certainly is, and I have to say, and listen, there's nothing I can say that fixes this, but I do hope that you can show yourself some grace, because I know, having dealt with loss with people before, I've had loss in my own life, and I know that the number one stressor in people's life is losing a child, and the number one category within that category is losing one violently and suddenly, as opposed to a chronic disease that stretches out across time, which is horrible enough. But this is the most stressful, horrific event that any parent can ever suffer. And the two of you are going through that, of course. And listen, it's quite natural to take comfort in that no one is hurting your son anymore. And I know both of you are very dedicated in your religion, because we've met before, we've talked about it. I know that you have a deep faith and belief that you find comfort in. And I hope that you'll resolve any conflict in knowing that he is in a better place. And that can seem so trite to say, but when you think about what could be happening to him today that is not happening to him today, that is a real thing. That is a real reward. And I promise you, you're going to find yourself at times where you might be standing in the kitchen or something and look out the window, and a squirrel might do something funny, and you catch yourself laughing, and you'll stop and say, oh my God, what a horrible parent I am. How can I be laughing when I have a son that is dead and has suffered so much and then died? What kind of parent could be standing here laughing? Or you'll see some crazy sitcom or something, and you'll forget for a second and catch yourself laughing and say, what a horrible parent I must be. Please show yourself some grace, because that's not being a horrible parent. That is finding a way that our minds call time out and heal our hearts in a way that it patches up just a little stitch of pain and gives you some respite. Because as you say, you do have two beautiful children, and they deserve to have 100% of their mom and dad. Right now, they have 100% of their mother and father, but they also need 100% of mom and dad. And moms and dads are different than mothers and fathers. Moms and dads play, and moms and dads focus on what's important to them in a given moment, and that requires you to be 100% there. And pain and grief can be like a stench that you think, well, I wall that off from them. No, it permeates. It's like a stench in a room. It permeates every centimeter of the room. And I really implore you to not try to cordon this off or compartmentalize this, but to talk about Hersh all the time. Talk about him during holidays. Talk about him on his birthday. Talk about him at times that you shared as a family, because giving it a voice and remembering him with them, at first that may bring tears to your eyes, but I promise you, you know him. I did not know him, but I've seen so many pictures of him, and he radiated so much joy, and his smile was infectious. He would not want to be a source of pain for the rest of your lives. He would want to know that you cared, but if he thought every time you thought of him, it hurt, he would think, what did I spend all of those years in their lives for if I didn't become a source of joy and create memories that would bring happiness to their hearts? You know that that's what he wants. And if every time you thought of him, he thought, boy, I create a lot of pain in their lives, there's no joy that I left behind, you know he would not want that. So you've
Yeah,
got
we
to give
say that
yourself
all the
permission.
time.
I'm glad you do.
We say that all the time, that we feel for sure that he would absolutely want us to be happy. And we do already, tell stories and start laughing. And we know that that is what he would be desiring for us. And we know that's what we want for ourselves. And we even I said today to someone, if God forbid a million times I had been kidnapped and this had happened to me, I would be devastated if my family was miserable for the rest of their lives because they were missing me. I would want them to love me, and I would want them to go on to have happy and meaningful lives while missing me. It's okay. Everybody in life goes through something challenging, and we happen to be having a real triple dose at this moment.
Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. Could the US dollar be on the precipice of collapse? 19% of Americans 65 and older are still working. That's double from 35 years ago. Some people say that's something our elected leaders should be fixing. So what do you do? Well, I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm turning to physical gold and silver, and I encourage you to do the same thing right now. Preserve Gold is the only company I trust and recommend to my own friends and family, and you can trust them too. Today, they're giving away a free precious metals guide that contains essential information on how to help protect your accounts. Just text Dr. Phil to 50505. As an exclusive offer for my fill-in-the-blanks friends, in addition to their free guide, you can also get up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil, P-H-I-L, to 50505 to claim this exclusive offer from Preserve Gold today.
Say goodbye to traditional car buying or leasing and say hello to freedom and flexibility. FlexCar is Atlanta's only month-to-month car lease with zero down payment and ability to cancel at any time. Cars start at just $199 a month, and insurance, maintenance, 24/7 roadside assistance, and more are all covered under your one monthly bill. Get approved in minutes and have your car delivered straight to you within a few days. First-time customers get 100 free miles with code ATL100. Find out why more people are switching to FlexCar today at flexcar.com.
Of course. And listen, everybody grieves in a different way at a different time. And there are going to be days that Jon is having a terrible day and you're doing maybe you're a little bit stronger that day and you lift him up that day. And there are going to be days that you're so low that Dan looks up. And so Jon comes and lifts you up just a little bit. And that's a great thing that you grieve in different days. And the length and breadth of your pain and suffering is not associated with the length and breadth of your love for the person that you lost. I mean, some people will grieve terribly for 6 months and others for a year. It doesn't mean that the one that grieved for a year loved twice as much as the one that grieved deeply for 6 months. People heal differently. They express their grief in different ways. There's a point where you'll say, it's time for us to celebrate Hersh. It's time for us to use his life for these other hostages. And it may be hostages that are still taken today. It may be some that are taken in the Congo a year from now. But I know you two, and you two are going to use that young man's life. He will not be forgotten, and his life will be used. I know it because I've talked to you. I know that you will. And it may start today. It may start a year from now. But I know that this young man will never be forgotten.
I think that's all so important for us to hear. And it's something that we are actually already manifesting, which is within our grief and our suffering and our decision that we gotta still live life, we're also embracing the mission that we think would be the best way to honor Hersh and the other 5 when he was found. And that is, if out of our grief, we could play any small role in saving the remaining 101, that is what Hersh would want. So our pleas that we had for 350 days that didn't work for us, we're continuing on this path. We're trying to give a wake-up call to decision makers around the world, to the leaders of the 23 nationalities still represented among the hostage population, and say to those people, it is not too late. It is for ours, but there are others, and they must be saved immediately.
Well, you know, Rachel, you mentioned Auschwitz, and one of the most meaningful books I've ever read, and I've probably given away hundreds of copies, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. You know, he says in that book that they could control everything for the captives in Auschwitz. They controlled whether you could stand, whether you could sit, whether you lived, whether you died, whether you could eat, whether you could sleep. But he said they couldn't control one thing. They couldn't control the attitude that I took about it inside. They couldn't control what I said to myself inside. They couldn't control my inner reality about it. And that is so profound. And I choose to believe that was true of Hersh. I see it being manifested in the two of you now, because that's how terrorists work. They terrorize a few to terrorize thousands, millions, and they can't hold dominion over you and Jon, Rachel. They can't do that unless you allow them to. And you're not allowing them to. You didn't allow them to when you and I, the three of us, sat down in Israel and we talked about it then. They're not controlling it now as we talk about it, and you're inspiring the families of those whose loved ones are still held captive. You're offering hope and inspiration to them now. You're defeating terrorists right now by showing you haven't broken us. We're not quitting. We're still here. And you took our son away, but you didn't take away our hope. You didn't take away our will to continue to fight against you. So you are using it as we sit here and talk right now. You are embodying what Viktor Frankl wrote about in Man's Search for Meaning.
You know, Dr. Phil, we experienced so many unusual things on this journey. One of them is we had a rare opportunity at a practice run of this kind of grief, which is to say, on October 7th at night, I was called to the local police station to give DNA samples. And I went and I came home, and Rachel and I first had the conversation in our bedroom of, we may have now lost our son. He might never come home. And we talked about it and we cried about it. And we said that night, if this is the case, we are going to grieve and we are going to live life and move on. And then 36 hours later, we got the good news that he was taken captive, and we began our journey to save his life, only to end up at the same result 330 days later. So we've twice had the chance to make a decision that we were going to do what we're talking about right here in this conversation.
Well, and I want to just be clear. We don't mean move on and,
Right.
this is behind us, like then that,
Right.
it was Thanksgiving and now we've moved on. But it's just going to become something that's incorporated, that we carry with us always. And we will deal with it in different ways as time goes on. But we really do want to be facing forward. And, in the Bible, there is a famous saying of, I'm setting before you today the choice of life and death, and I am telling you to choose life. And we are deciding to take that prescriptive, and we are choosing life. And it will be difficult for a very long time to process this really largest of challenges that a parent can swallow. But we're going to choose life, and we're going to bring Hersh's beautiful memory with us, and his light will always be shining on us, and it will be very challenging for a very long time, but we are choosing life.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I have two final questions. and thank you for the generosity of your time. Two final questions. First, what do you have to say? When we were together in Jerusalem, we sat on that patio, the Prime Minister Netanyahu was there. I know former President Trump watched that interview because he told me he did. I know that this will be seen by millions around the world. It's being seen by a lot of people right now. What do you say to those that are involved in the negotiations for getting back the hostages that are still held right now? What do y'all say, whether it's the United States government, the Israeli government, the various agencies? What do you say to those that are engaged in the process right now?
What I would focus on in one word is urgency. It's the piece that we continue to say we pushed but never quite succeeded in conveying that message. Dr. Martin Luther King fought for civil rights with, in his words, the fierce urgency of now. He said, we can't wait for racial justice to come to us. We need to fight for it with the fierce urgency of now. And that is the message I would impart to world leaders. There's no shortage of real geopolitical issues going on, and certainly in our region. We're in a war in the north. We're still at war in Gaza. We have plenty of issues that we all, as a people, as a country, as a region, as a world, need to face and solve. But one of those right now is a matter of life and death, literally every single second, and that is the hostages still being held and tortured. Let's prioritize that. Let's get them home, and we will work to solve all of the other issues.
Rachel, what would you add?
I think that the single item that can be the relief of the pressure in this entire region, and obviously, as everyone well knows, there are also not just thousands and thousands of people suffering in Israel. There are thousands and thousands of people suffering in Gaza and in this entire region. And the pressure valve is this hostage issue. If we can get these hostages home, that relieves all of the tension. So maybe we can talk more rationally about all of the other issues that we have on the plate in this entire neighborhood, which are real, and they are also incredibly time-sensitive issues. But this is, while we're speaking, people are starving and dying, and we can do something about that. We've just finished the holiday of Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement. And in the Jewish religion, the way that you really atone, the way that you really repent for things that you have done wrong, that you know you've done wrong, according to the Jewish tradition, is you get yourself into that same situation and you make a different choice. Mm-hmm. We did not save those 6. We have an opportunity now to repent for that by saving those 101. And I would encourage everyone who is with power, with influence, with leadership, to do it now.
Well, you say that so well. You mentioned Martin Luther King, and you recall he said the most pernicious danger is not the manifest action of those with bad intentions. It is the apathy and inaction of well-meaning citizens. Mm-hmm. It's the apathy that you're talking about. It's the urgency that needs to come into play. Apathy is what can create the most problems for those that are still held captive. We can't live with apathy. We must have urgency. And you guys say it so very well. The last question I have is, what message do you have for the families of the 100+ that still have someone held in captivity?
Well, we've said every single day, hope is mandatory. It's not a suggestion and it's not advice. And they all know it. I mean, we've been part of that hostage family cohort since October 7th of last year. Tragically, our hostage, we did get home, not the way that we wanted him, but we got him home. And I truly want to continue sending, which I do daily in my daily prayers. I send prayers to the hostages by name and their families. And I just pray for their continued strength and resilience. It is as our friend Ruby Chen, who has a son who was killed last October 7th, his body was taken. It is still being held hostage in Gaza. He has said, you're sprinting a marathon every single day. And I wish them, all of them, continued courage and stamina and always, always hope. Because when you fall to the other side of hope, that's despair, and that's a really dangerous place to be.
Well, that's such a great message. Jon, anything you want to add?
No, I think that's it. I guess what I would say is we were actively in this struggle every second for 330 days. And although we got Hersh, and we gave him a proper burial, we know what the other families are going through. And so to the extent that this gives them any help, any hope, any strength, I want them to know we are still in the struggle with you, and we are not stopping until we get all of the remaining hostages home.
So well said. Jon, Rachel, thank you both so much for joining me today. I appreciate this. I hope to see you both in person very soon, and just know that you're in our hearts and prayers, and I know that God holds Hersh in his hands as well as the two of you, and you'll get through this, but you'll never forget it, and that's not what we want to do. And you've honored Hersh by the words you've spoken here today, the feelings that you've shared here today. You've done him proud. So God bless him, and God bless the two of you. And I look forward to being with you in person very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your support throughout this.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Phil, there aren't many words after listening to the pain of a mother and of a father. And I can't help but think, listening to them, and as you said, the world is going to hear this. The urgency is not there. And we watch what's playing out in this country right now. There is a discussion, and there is an apathy, as you pointed out, when it comes to terror organizations. There is no right side of terror. And hopefully this will remind people of the reality of what is happening.
Well, you know, I think it's so easy for all of us to wake up every morning and respond to what's put in front of us, and you forget what someone is going through, and it can be out of sight, out of mind, and it's endemic upon us to keep it in mind. And you know, it's spending time with wonderful people like Jon and Rachel is behind the motive that's made me so outspoken about what we're hearing on college campuses in America. When I see our young people that are out there protesting on behalf of terrorists, mass murderers, of their fellow Americans, I mean, come on.
It's unspeakable.
It is. We have failed our young people.
We've got our colleges and universities around this country that are out there celebrating people that are doing what has happened here. These are, and it's not just that they're Americans, but these are Americans. It's like they're celebrating our enemies. You know, they took this young man. He lost his hand when they took him. He was shot through one hand and into his other arm and up through his shoulder, and held for 33 days and then just executed. Yeah. If that happened to one of their family members, I posted a video just last week, I think it was. What's it going to take? Is that evil going to have to come to their doorstep? Are they going to have to rape their baby sister? Are they going to have to kill their loved ones for them to go, hey, wait a minute, who am I supporting here? Who am I celebrating here? Yeah. Wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up. Come on. What are you thinking?
Yeah. I think by having Rachel and Jon on the way that you did, first of all, any parent, and I myself found myself in them. That is a parent's worst nightmare, is for your child to be taken and for that kind of torture and inhumane treatment to take place like that and not knowing. So as we sit here and we bring the news, right, and we report on the facts and what's happening and the numbers, what that interview does is it brings the humanity to the equation. It brings the family to the equation. Yeah. And I and everybody else watching can see themselves, and you appreciate the urgency and the necessity in that.
Yeah, there is an urgency, there's a necessity. You said it perfectly, Dr. Phil. We need to wake up.
Yeah.
Our college campuses need to wake up. Our leaders need to wake up.
We're not talking about politics here.
No.
Did anybody hear me ask if they were Republicans or Democrats? No. Or I could care less.
It's irrelevant. That's
right. I could care less. People say, Dr. Phil, your training's in psychology. Why are you doing this interview? I'm doing this interview because this is human functioning. This has nothing to do with politics. I could care less whether they are Democrats or Republicans, whether Hersh was Democrat or Republican. It doesn't make it. This isn't political. This is family.
Yeah. Right.
And we have a collective consciousness in America. This is our culture. And when I see young people that don't have enough critical thinking to know right from wrong, to know a murderer from a champion, and they paint everybody as oppressed or oppressor, somebody forgot to teach these people how to think, to differentiate right from wrong. And that's a cultural issue. That's a psychological failing on the part of our system, on the part of our parents, on the part of these young people. And I put something like that up and get death threats and all kinds of things. Well, I'm sorry. I know right from wrong when I see it at that level, and I'm going to call it out. And I am sorry for this family. I am sorry for Hersh. And we need to stand up and say so. And everybody that's hearing this needs to stand up and say so.
And Dr. Phil, I remember during your conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he made a point to say how disappointed he was in seeing what was going on in our college campuses. And he actually went so far as to say, those young people are useful idiots. And then you have Iran come out and say, when we do move this fight to the United States, those are our terror cells.
All we can do is say it and keep saying it, say it again. Say it again.
And keep bringing those stories.
Yes, those are the stories we need to continue to see and we need to continue to hear.
Well, thank you for hosting me here on the news today.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Say goodbye to traditional car buying or leasing and say hello to freedom and flexibility. FlexCar is Atlanta's only month-to-month car lease with zero down payment and ability to cancel at any time. Cars start at just $199 a month, and insurance, maintenance, 24/7 roadside assistance, and more are all covered under your one monthly bill. Get approved in minutes and have your car delivered straight to you within a few days. First-time customers get 100 free miles with code ATL100. Find out why more people are switching to FlexCar today at flexcar.com.